Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So my mind is blank. Don't know what to say anymore. There's that story where Luangpor Viradhammo had just finished I always tell this story every retreat, but he just finished a retreat with about 100 people, 10-day retreat, quite a lot of interviews. And I came into his kuti and he went, blah, 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 blah. So that's how your mind gets after a while. Oh, what am I going to say? So let's see. Let's see how this goes. So we monitor desire during meditation, and this I know helps deal with all kinds of desire in daily life. But desires for unwholesome activities such as brain-numbing TV series, social media, etc., are still to be reckoned with for children and adults. Could Prajan please share a few thoughts on this subject? Merci. I also want to express my gratitude for positive impact you have on the world, etc. Okay. So that's our cultural problem, isn't it? Our culture is really not geared to renunciation. It's geared to consumption. And they probably have the best psychologists in the world working on ways to delude us. It's pathetic. And the methods of modern media are the video, the audio, they're just so good. They're just so skillfully done. And then somehow these social media platforms have become totally addictive. So it's a cultural problem. How to deal with it? It's in terms of classic Buddhism, it's sense restraint. So don't go there. You know, what else can you say? Or throw your cell phone into the river, or something drastic. You can, like, if you can get a sort of, if you see the effect these things have on the mind's inability to stay with the background, if we use that model, that anything that compels you to constantly be in the foreground is going to be quite destructive of your possibility of realizing liberation. So the foreground of our life is necessary. I mean, we live in it, so we have to deal with it. But if there's something so compelling that you cannot not be in the foreground, I mean, that's quite sick, actually. You know, it's not good. We have, like, we as monastics have quite strict rules about the first, at least each monastery has its own rules around the use of media and so on. And like, we have a young man who pleads with me, please don't let me get on the internet. Pleads with me, please, protect me from, because as soon as he gets on there, he just goes to all kinds of websites. So we have rules and disciplines around that. But then we're a monastery, we're supposed to be doing that. But it is, like, say, one of the really troubling things I notice with young men is the addiction to porn. And that's horrible. It's just like young guys have been looking at porn since they're 10 years old or 12 years old. So not only does that destroy one's perception of women, it's also terribly, terribly addictive. So it's a huge cultural problem. So as an adult, if you have control over children's access to these things, then you have to be, I suppose, just very strict. And I don't know how to do that. Kids are usually smarter than their parents, unfortunately. And well, not smarter, but more devious, maybe. So who has an answer to that? A whole culture's thinking about that, actually. You consider it. So, but as a contemplative, if you just notice like some things you'll watch and they won't have a huge effect on you, and you can walk away from them. Some things will have an effect where you can't put them down, you can't look at them, and some will have a really negative effect. You just get negative and depressed and cynical about life. So those you have to take responsibility for. If your mind is going to cynicism and negativity and things like that, then you just have to stop doing it. You have to, because your mind is like, if you eat junk food, your body gets a heart attack. If you consume mental junk food, your mind gets a mind attack. It's not good. So you have to, Indriya Samvara is the basic structure that we talk about sense restraint. And when we think about the 5 precepts, kamesu, michachara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami, in the 5 precept structure, usually that's just about illicit sexuality, but it means more. It means sense restraint, that you restrain your sense outputs in a way that helps you not be, if we use that metaphor, in lost in the foreground. So that takes self-discipline. What else can you say? Work requires the monastery. We wouldn't survive as a largish community without the internet. We'd survive as a hermit community, probably, a couple of monks and a dog or something like that. But as a larger community, it's just a part of it. So we have to be very, very careful. But I think most monks that come to in later, when they're older, they're pretty fed up with all that. So they have a sense of not getting lost in it. Again, I don't have any. Our culture is just so out there. Just the mind going outside is Luangpor Dun's phrasing, the Four Noble Truths. The mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. That's our culture. It just grabs your attention with such really cool stuff, or really gross stuff, or whatever. So you have to protect your mind. You can play around and you can put time limits on things as a practice. But probably the best thing is, like, first of all, internet fasting. You fast on food. Is line the thing that people do here? Line fasting. It sounds pretty easy. Just don't look at line. Okay. Why is it so difficult? It's incredible. So, I mean, you can play around with it. You can say, I'll look at line 10 times in a day. That's not much. That's a lot, right? It's a lot. So you make that your practice. I'll look at line 10 times a day. It's not fasting. It's just consuming padi. So in the morning, you wake up and you look at line and you'll forget what you were going to do. So there's 1. You get 9 left, right? And then you want to go for the second one, but you'll have a sign on your fridge saying 10 lines. So you remember, now you remember, okay. So then you would have restrained yourself for 20 minutes. You said, well, now I deserve another one. Okay, here's two. But it's only 7:30 in the morning. You've got 8 left, right? So, by around 2 o'clock, you've only got 1 left. And now now it's really fasting. But, but now you can see desire. Now you can really see wanting feels this way. And unfulfilled wanting feels this way. So you could just put the phone down in front of you and look at it. And maybe it would ring. But although we the reason we laugh because it's real. It's real. So I think the people that I know that kind of do this most skillfully, they just times they're not available and they don't touch the thing, put it in the fridge or whatever. And so they do like Sundays, they don't look at the internet and if you build on things like that, then usually restraint has to be pretty, I think, the boundaries have to be very clear. If they're fuzzy, like, let's say eating in the afternoon, that's not a moral thing. It's just a kind of convention that we live by. But we say, well, we say in the monastery, we say midday, not 12:01. Midday, that's it. Bas, finished. But if we said, well, kind of sometime in the afternoon, don't eat. It's only 4:30. There'd be no line drawn. So in terms of monastic discipline, there are very clear lines which are drawn, and that's so helpful. And not that it's like for a monk, if he eats, a banana at 12:30, that he's going to drop into hell, because it's really a minor thing in that way. But because like in say our Vinaya, there are some rules which are moral, but some are just conventions. And sometimes monks get that mixed up, that there's a difference between killing a rat and eating a banana at 12:15. There's a different mental state there. But what we do is we take it seriously, and then we watch our desire to go outside those boundaries. And because those boundaries are so very, very clear, it's quite easy to watch. So like our relationships with women are very constrained, which is great. Then we can really look at the interchange we have with women. The use of money, we don't have power over money, and negotiating terms of a contract, we can't do that. Lay people have to do that. And being with their robes and dawn, and if we have a hole in the robe and we see it, we have to get it patched in 10 days. And so all these little things that the Buddha and the elders from the time of the Buddha have created make very, very clear definition about the foreground. And then we as monastics keep adapting that to modern culture. So all monasteries have very strict rules about the internet, who can use, who cannot use, who has access to Wi-Fi, and many other things. So this is one of the things about Theravada Buddhism. The Buddha, as you know, when he is asked by the Venerable Anand or other bhikkhus, who do you leave as your successor? And he says, I don't leave a person, I leave the Dhamma Vinaya. Now, the Vinaya is not something that lay people have access to in the same way we do, because the Buddha couldn't set up a Vinaya for everyone, because lay people have different lifestyles and different ways of functioning. But you do find that in Islam. The Quran is like a Vinaya for everyone. And in Judaism, it would be what? It's the Torah. Is it right? I think. but Theravada Buddhism doesn't have that. So for lay people, you have like general principles, but you kind of have to develop your own Vinaya. And so the Buddha says, I leave you the Dhamma Vinaya. He realized there was the foreground of existence that we have to live in, and we have to do that well. And so the Teras from the time of the Buddha have defined it quite helpfully, and we continue to define it. So we have that kind of help as samanas. So you have to develop your own Vinaya, and then you have to honor it. And around modern media, it's I don't know, but how you do that. So like on a retreat, I think the retreat organizers ask you to give up your phones. That's a really kind thing to do, isn't it? You may not like it, right? But that's so much compassion. I don't think we do that in Canada. I think we're too afraid. So how could you introduce, I mean, you can see the profit of not being bombarded. How could you introduce that on a weekend? Or, on an afternoon where for 4 hours you don't look at it. If you make the timeline definite, then you can at least meditate with it. So if you make the timeline, after 7 o'clock, I don't look at whatever, then there's a definite line, 7 o'clock. No, you can't negotiate 7:05. I'm sorry, it's 7 o'clock. That's very, very helpful. Or you do a day. A lot of people do an internet fast once a week, all Sunday, say. And if you develop those skills, then you're developing Adhitthana Bharami. And Adhitthana Bharami is the determination to develop a lifestyle which is appropriate to freedom. It's freedom, right? And you feel very good about that. Adhitthanas, which are well done, make you feel like you're really implementing the most valuable part of your insight and the wisdom of your mind. So, and then to do an adhitthana, you have to design it, what you're going to do. And then you have to make it quite clear and definite. And sometimes you declare it. So you go to a teacher and you say to the teacher, I'm going to do this, this, and that. And that sort of ups the ante. You don't just say it to your cat. Say it to my cat, I'm going to adhitthana not to look at line. Agree with me? You make it a bit more difficult than that. So you say it to someone you really, really respect. And so the adhitthana is like a setting of the mind to be mindful of a certain habit which you want to work around. And if you set your mind very, very clearly and you put that in place, you then start to remember that. You start to be more mindful, and then you work with the Four Noble Truths. You want something. Oh, wanting feels this way. So you're not suppressing the desire to look at line, but you're looking at the desire to look at line. And then you're back with the Four Noble Truths. If you just force yourself not to do something, sometimes that works. But then quite often, as soon as you take off that force, you're just into the same consuming habit. But if you're actually using the Four Noble Truths as a practice, and then an adhitthana within that, then you have a really interesting way of contemplating Four Noble Truths. So monks will quite often, do, okay, for the vasa, I won't do dessert. That's easy enough. And so you kind of, there goes the dessert. All right. But it's actually quite easy if you make it definite. If you say, I'm not going to do desserts that are colored brown. Nah, come on. You can do better than that. So you make it quite clear. So adhitthana bharami is very energizing. If it's done with intelligence, if it's just done with some blind willpower, then it's just blind willpower. So if it's done with it, and the intelligence is around the Four Noble Truths. How you work with kids, I mean, You're the boss. If you got kids, you're the boss. If you let the kids be the boss, oh, I don't know. That's not a good idea. I've never had kids, but I've seen kids who boss their parents, and they're going to be terrorists soon. You know, I wouldn't loosen them on the planet. But it's a cultural problem. It's totally opposed to the silence of the mind, isn't it? The mind going outside is the cause, the result of the mind going outside is suffering, the mind knowing the mind. How can I know the mind if I'm always consuming and I'm preoccupied with consumption? And yet, economies seem to be based on that. You know, we have to consume more. When was it? Yeah, after 9/11, I think. Wasn't it? Didn't one of the presidents say, you know, we have to consume more or something? To solve the problems of 9/11? I can't quite. At one point, that was the solution of life. Keep the economy going, keep consuming more. Crazy. So what we're doing is so radical that we'd probably get arrested. we're, we're, we're encouraging non-consumption. So monks are really radical that way. Unfortunately, there's not enough of us. Anyway, I don't know if that's an answer, but it's certainly a serious thing that everyone grapples with. When we recognize foreground, can I define it as an anicca dukkha anatta? Yes, that's the idea, because when the idea of the three characteristics, trilakkhana, is that by knowing something is change, then you're with the mind. As anatta, then you're knowing it, not me, not mine. As dukkha, don't go there. Then that takes you to the background. That is the background in some sense. It's the wisdom of the background. That's the use of anicca dukkha anatta as a constant perception, as opposed to a conceptual agreement that Buddhists make. As Buddhists, we make, we agree that which arises ceases. It's anicca dukkha anatta. So that's just conceptual. How do you take that conceptual structure as a practice? And that's what, say, as I said earlier, sati always implies mindfulness through a kind of a theme, let's say. So anicca sanya, the perception of change, you're mindful of change, brings you to the background. So when you're in the foreground of line, and line is what, like a written communication, right? So it's like we're like text messages, that kind of thing. Okay, when you're absorbed into that, you're not noticing change. You just, wow, she did that, or whatever your mind is doing. But if you're noticing change, you look at line, and you notice your mind changing, then you're in the background. So you could do that, but you'd probably fail. You'd still, well, she did that. You'd go for that. So it's probably not a good strategy. Or like if you're watching Netflix or some movie, and then if you were able to watch the screen, and so this is changing, but you wouldn't. That music's great, isn't it? Oh, look at, you'd be in it because that's why it's designed. Now, if you got really bored, then you'd get another one. You wouldn't, you don't buy a boring Netflix film, do you? Does anyone do that? Yes, just do that. Just look at the most boring film that you get, and then pay your $5 and just watch change. There you go. Netflix would like that because no one else is watching that film. But the idea of anicca sanya, or not me, not mine, is to bring you to the background. So if there's like self-disparagement comes up that I did something and I'm just critical of myself, and there's the language of self-criticism, I say, oh, That language, not me, not mine, that takes me to the background. And dukkha too, that the mind going outside is the cause, and your mind wants to go out there. No, that's not nibbana out there. Nibbana is back here. So certainly that's the use of anicca, dukkha, anatta as meditative tools, contemplative tools, rather than just as, like I said, cultural agreements. And here we go. Come on. Can walking meditation be fast paced? Yes. It's a long question. I got it quick. Remember that mindfulness is not control. So if you're coming from the Mahasi tradition, that's a particular technique that needs to be used in the context, I think, of the whole Mahasi tradition. When Ajahn Chah was asked, like, do we have to do walking meditation slowly? His question is, what do you do if you have diarrhea? It's true, yeah. Sorry about that. So, I found that especially as a young monk, I had too much energy. I would just, I'd go down like, wow, back and forth, back and forth. If I had a lot of anger, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then it would maybe settle down, and then I'd just walk at a normal pace. Now I walk like an old man, slowly, slowly. So, like someone in the internet question asked, can I do walking meditation on a treadmill? Do they call them treadmills? Yeah. Yeah, why not? And then they said they like to close their eyes because they're not distracted. I said, oh, right. I couldn't do that. But the idea that like just that question, can I do it and close my eyes so I'm not distracted? Well, awareness is never distracted, really. Awareness just knows. So that's a kind of, I would say to that question, what are you trying to do? You're just trying to control. Why wouldn't you open your eyes when you're on a treadmill? It wouldn't be a safer option. So I guess that person has a sense of not wanting to be distracted, which we do on a retreat, right? But mindfulness is the centering that we use. So like in walking meditation, the recommendation is to keep your eyes cast down and not look around, but not in some kind of sense to just control, but just to know the mind wanting to go outside. So it's very helpful, that containment, keeping your eyes down. It's different than botanizing or bird watching. What was the name of the bird that goes, ooh, what did we say the name of that bird was? Gao wow. Yeah, it goes gao wow. That's why it's called gao wow. So like if you're a birder, then you walk around looking at the birds. Great. But when you're doing walking meditation, you're looking at your mind, right? So that's why you keep your eyes cast down back and forth in a kind of gentle way. So there's different ways to do walking meditation. If you find walking really, really slow is profitable, sure, just give it a go. But if you got diarrhea, you better, speed it up a bit, better go somewhere. So then if you have a practice which is very calming, like very, very slow, then you have the idea that everything has to be done slow. And that would be, that would just be control. So I think as a young monk, I tried that, like I count the number of steps and I count the number of spoonfuls and all that horrible kind of practice. I said, what? I don't want to live like that. Oh my gosh, that'd be terrible. But that's not mindful. That's just kind of keeping track of events. Whereas the mind, which is very open, welcoming, just knows I like the food, I don't like the food, eating quickly, I just spilled the yogurt on my robe, or just the ordinary things of eating. So it's very, very relaxed. And of all the words I think that I heard today in the interviews, I think I like the word welcoming. It's a lovely word. And just from those interviews, just thinking how we can use language in very, very simple ways. And to me, that is the beauty of samma sankappa, right thought, and it's speech, but it's right coming from right understanding. So when I have some insight around the way I like to develop my mind, then I just start to use very simple language. So like the word welcoming, you're just sitting there, just welcome the moment. It's like this simple word, but it has a profound effect if you have the insight around what welcoming means. So, as we approach the end of the retreat, think of the words that are profoundly affect you. So one person said the word "I" is very helpful, and I can understand that. I use "I" too, and it's just a word or just a sound, but "I," and that brings you back to insight. We can lose insight. So then we're using language in this really interesting way of awakening, because we're just returning to one thing, aren't we? The awakened mind. It's that one thing again and again and again. But then there's like nuance to it, like welcoming, I. And then it may be more complicated. This open unknowing, this is what I am, not something I can know. That's a whole long phrase, but it kind of touches something in our own minds. So I suggest that you write down a few words that really have worked for you, and then put them on your fridge, right? Or like my screensaver on my computer is presence ever absent. Really coolest screensaver you've ever seen. So that the computer starts to go to sleep, and then boink, it's presence ever absent. I really like that. And I see it there, and then it disappears. So this use of language in a non-analytical way, in a way of reminding and awakening is very, very useful. So I think that's all that comes to mind. So maybe we'll finish early today. Leave that for your reflection.